Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Puma PWRFRAME TR2. So 3 pros that I have with this model is it's a pretty dang good generalist shoe for the price. So for this model, you can expect to pay around $80. Now, when you look at training shoes that cost less than $100, it can always be super variable with their performance. But the shoe has done an exceptional job for my light strength sessions, my HIIT workouts, and my circuit style work, and even some short runs. So if you're trying to spend less than $100 and you want a shoe that's good for a little bit of everything, this can be a really awesome option to explore. The second pro of this model is it's a really good shoe in my opinion for narrow to medium width feet. So if you're constantly feeling like you're swimming around in your training shoes when doing lateral work, jumping and whatnot, this can be a good option, and the upper security I think should give you enough security for that foot anatomy to not have you feeling like you're not secure in your workout context. So for narrow and medium width feet, I think this shoe will be a pretty good bet. You do also get a little bit of arch in this model, so that's also an ask you're after. This shoe will align with your foot anatomy pretty well. The third pro with this model is if you want a shoe for some walking and some short runs, the shoe should do a pretty good job. Now, I would not walk with these outside in inclement weather because we do have exposed foam, but if you want that shoe to wear out and about for errands and then also for some walking and some short running, this shoe feels pretty good. Honestly, I see it as a really good comparable option from like the Nike Free Metcon 5, which has a $40 price point increase over this model. This model feels very comfortable. And so if you want that HIIT focused shoe that you can walk in and wear out and about casually, this model should work pretty well. Plus the upper is pretty breathable in this model for its price. So I do see it as a good option in that context as well. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the PWRFRAME TR2. So 2 cons that I have with the PWRFRAME TR2 is number 1, if you have wide feet, this is not going to be the model for you. You get a pretty aggressive taper in this model's toe box, and so I have an E-width foot, and I noticed this right out of the box with the shoe. Is it bearable to wear for sessions? Yes, but is it my favorite model to necessarily wear all day? Not really. I tried wearing this out and about to walk the dog and then to go train in and then also to run some errands in, and I did notice the toe box width. So I think if you're constantly battling toe box widths regarding your feet feeling cramped, this would not be the best shoe for you. That's why I also suggest this model being great for narrow medium width feet, but if you have wider feet, steer clear of this model entirely. The second con that I have with this shoe is it kind of runs a little bit long, and it's awkward because with its narrower width, I wouldn't necessarily suggest sizing down for most foot anatomies. And so with it running a little bit long and with this heel construction, I was finding that I was kind of almost sliding into the toe box at times, and then my heel would have a little bit of movement. So I really had to crank these laces tight, hence why the midfoot is pretty cranked down on this model. Now, when I did this, that wasn't an issue. However, I think if you're constantly battling having too much room at the end of your toe box, this model is going to run long to begin with. And it's tough because I don't think sizing down would necessarily be the right call, because with the width, you might feel limited. So the length can be a little bit problematic. It might just mean that you're gonna have to crank the laces down a little bit tighter, but that should fix it. However, I wanted to make that known because I definitely picked up on that right away when I was doing lunges and split squats and basically anything where I was getting a lot of flex through the forefoot and my heel had the chance to pop out. But now let's talk about the performance of the PWRFRAME TR2. To chat on the performance of the PWRFRAME TR2, I'll break this section to a few different parts. I'll talk about the shoe's performance for lifting, cross training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, the shoe is okay. It is what you would expect from a budget shoe designed for more HIIT focused workouts, circuits, and classes and whatnot. So with this shoe, I would suggest probably capping your loading to about 315 pounds. That's when I started to notice more compression with this model's midsole and with the heel to toe drop. While they don't necessarily disclose what it is, you definitely feel a little bit pitched forward in this model. So for deadlifts and RDLs and basically any form of lower body movement where I wanted a slightly flatter foot position, that was kind of problematic at times because you'd slide into the end of the toe box, and so again you had to crank those laces tight to get that security. But all that said, if you're a beginner and if you want a shoe for some strength sessions here and there, or you plan to just do some light free weights, some light machine work, and some body weight work, this model will work for your needs. Now I will say, if you're planning on going super heavy with your shoes, I would look into something different. Plus with this model, because you have exposed foam, I don't want you to be doing like a heavy leg press or hack squat with the shoe and have any form of slip here if this starts to wear on you at all. So all that said, this model will work for lifting, but again, you're gonna have some limitations there based on the shoe's construction. The Pro Foam midsole is gonna compress a little bit, and that's gonna be more noticeable above like 275 and 315 pounds. When it comes to cross training, honestly, this shoe has been pretty exceptional, and I'll give it to Puma for making this model with its price point performing the way it has, because with this model's reworked upper construction, it does feel like it gives you a little bit more security, especially when you get that lacing security right. So when I'm doing any form of lateral work, I wasn't having spillover issues in this model, which I personally liked. And I like that the upper, I think, hugs the foot pretty evenly throughout the forefoot and the midfoot. So if you're doing box jumps, jump rope, or if you're just doing any form of like plyo single leg work, this model I think should work regarding its upper security. Also, you do get a nice level of bounce with that ProFoam EVA midsole. So this model does have a nice responsive feel to it. And with the slight beveling of the heel and the toe spring, I feel like it feeds really well into HIIT style workouts where you're gonna be heavily on the forefoot. Also with this shoe, you get that PWRFRAME tech here, which is essentially like this rubber TPU layer that wraps under the base of the forefoot. I feel like this does help contribute a little bit to giving you some lateral support when training in the shoe. So I think that's also a perk of this model for HIIT sessions. Now I will say again, this model can run a little bit long. So if it is long on you to begin with, you're gonna need to crank those laces tight or wear thicker socks. Just putting it out there because again, this model can run a little bit long. In the context of short runs, this model I think will work if you're doing intervals from like 400 meters to 800 meters, or even tacking on like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 miles pre or post workout. For like a very casual mile, this model was comfortable enough, and that's on a treadmill or a woodway runner, which is what I use this model for. And in that context, the shoe is a pretty good like hybrid style shoe when it comes to, okay, you could wear it for HIIT or a class, you could also do some strength work in it, and then you could also do some very casual cardio work in it without it feeling super uncomfortable. The toe spring and beveling of the heel I think feed well into this context, and again, this midsole is pretty comfortable. Plus you do get some decent outsole tread here on the heel and the forefoot, which is where you're gonna want it when you're running. Now, would I suggest using this shoe for long distance runs? Not necessarily. You're gonna wanna find something that's way more specific for that training style. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe is okay. Honestly, if they made the toe box wider and they potentially covered this exposed foam, this would be a really comfortable shoe for daily wear. I like the way the ProFoam midsole feels when wearing it out and about casually if I don't feel like going with a minimalist shoe or a model that has a slightly denser midsole. So all that said, you can wear them for daily wear, but one thing I would say is with the toe box feeling a little bit more narrow, it could get uncomfortable if you're standing all day. Also, with this exposed foam here, if it's like rainy or muddy outside, those elements will definitely break down this foam at a faster rate. But overall, the shoe has been comfortable. They're just subtle things that don't align with my foot anatomy that kind of knock this shoe's overall comfort. When it comes to the price of the Puma PWRFRAME TR2, you can expect to pay $80. Now, I think that price point is pretty fair for what this shoe offers. Is it gonna be your best shoe for CrossFit, heavy lifting, longer runs? No. That is where this shoe is gonna fall short. It's not super specific, but as a generalist shoe for under 100, I feel like the price point is pretty on point for what this shoe offers. All right, so now to answer the question, who should buy the Puma PWRFRAME TR2? Number one, I think if you're a beginner in the gym and you don't exactly know how you want to train full time and you're doing a little bit of everything, this can be a decent shoe. And this is more so for the person that is going to have a slightly more versatile bias to their training and they're not just focused on lifting. The second context is, once again, if you have a narrow or medium foot width, the shoe should work really well for your foot anatomy. It also has a bit of arch, so if you like a tiny bit of arch support in your training shoes, this model should resonate really well with you. The third context is if you want that training shoe that once again excels for HIIT, but you could also wear for a couple of miles pre or post workout and have it be pretty comfortable, this can be a great option. Also, it does feel a little bit more versatile for running compared to like the Nike Free Metcon 5, which is one of my favorite shoes for HIIT workouts and whatnot. So this could be like a really good class focused shoe if you're regularly taking classes, for example, that sprinkle in running with their programming. Now, who should pass on this model? Number one, if you're specific with your training and you need a training shoe for heavier lifting, CrossFit, or any form of work that's a little bit more serious in nature when it comes to like cross training, for example, this might not be the best shoe for you. Because it's a little bit more generalist, you're gonna lose out on some of the functionality when it comes to being dense enough to support heavy lifting or being durable enough for CrossFit or hard cross training sessions where you're gonna be putting a lot of stress into the shoe's sole and the upper. The second context is if you have wider and flatter feet, you're gonna wanna pass on this shoe. It's not gonna give you the width that you need through the midfoot, and with the aggressive toe box taper, again, this model can feel pretty dang limiting, and I have an E-width foot, so if you have a double E-width foot or wider foot, steer clear of the shoe entirely and save your money. When it comes to the sizing and fit of the Puma PWRFRAME TR2, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. And now, when I say most folks, I am gonna be a little bit more specific towards narrow and medium foot width. So if that is you, the shoe should fit fine true to size. Now, if you have an exceptionally narrow foot, maybe size down a half size because these run a little bit long, but again, I don't think that will necessarily need to be the case for most folks, even though they do have a bit of length. With that narrower toe box, it's just kind of awkward, I think, to even size down more, because then you're gonna have a really snug fit in the shoe, in my opinion. If you have a wider foot, if you have a flatter foot, pass on this model. Let's not even debate this in the comments, because I don't think you're gonna have the width you want from the shoe. And if you do want a little bit more room and you have a boxier foot, this toe box taper up here, I think can get pretty uncomfortable, and you might actually put additional wear and tear into the toe box because it runs so narrow. So just food for thought there before you invest in the shoe regarding your foot anatomy. All right, when it comes to the weight heel toe drop and insole in the PWRFRAME TR2, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of about 10 ounces. The heel to toe drop on this shoe is not disclosed on Puma's site. However, it definitely feels a little bit on the higher end. I would guess it's around like 5 to 8, depending on, because you do feel a bit of a forward pitch in this shoe. And then when it comes to the insole in this model, you do have a thin foam removable insole that you can take out, and it does have a nice level of cushion. All right, so now let's go over the construction of the PWRFRAME TR2. So looking at the upper in this shoe, you have a mesh and textile upper that wraps throughout. Puma has their Puma Power Tape upper on this model, and that is like these synthetic overlays here that help give this shoe additional security. The upper in this model is one of the major changes from the first PWRFRAME TR, by the way. Looking at the midsole of the shoe, you have a Pro Foam midsole that runs throughout the entirety of the shoe. So as you can see, there is a bit of bounce to this midsole as well. And then you have that PWRFRAME tech here that extends from the lateral into the medial side, and this interjects under the outsole here. Looking at the outsole, you have a Puma Grip outsole tread on the heel, and then up here on the forefoot and through the midfoot. You do have exposed foam here, so once again, be very conscious of wearing this shoe outdoors on concrete a ton, especially in inclement weather. Looking at the boot back here, you have a little bit of a structure, and you do have an external heel tab here and a tongue tab to help get the shoe on. The tongue itself is not gusseted, and it can slide at times, which can be a little annoying and frustrating. So just food for thought there is that you're definitely gonna lay this tongue flat every time you put them on, and then lace it just so it doesn't move as much on you. Looking at the midfoot construction, you have 5 core eyelets that go up, and then you have an additional 1, 2, 3 loops here on the tongue to help provide additional security. This top one doesn't really do much, so it's these bottom 2 that are really carrying the weight here for the shoe, and that's again why that tongue can be a little bit problematic to moving. But overall, those are pretty much the core construction features on the shoe. The main changes in this model have been the upper and the PWRFRAME tuck, but if you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Puma PWRFRAME TR2. Overall, it's a pretty consistent shoe. I like the original PWRFRAME TR, and the 2 I think is a nice continuation. It's not necessarily like this huge grandiose change shoe that has all these upgrades, but the subtle changes that Puma have made on this model, I don't think it's necessarily took the performance back, and so for the price, I think it's a pretty good generalist budget shoe. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.